Chelsea and Strasbourg fans have organised a protest on the 18th of April at Stamford Bridge just before the Man United game. So today we're going to take a little look at the recent history of protesting in football, specifically in the Premier League, but with a few other outlying examples. Welcome, Blue Believers, to another episode of the Stamford Sync, where we are syncing up with everything Chelsea FC. And today, it's time to talk about protests. Now, if you've seen any of these videos that I've done before, normally I do them with other people, but I've decided this is a really important thing to talk about. And I don't just want to go in half-cocked with the things I've seen on social media. And, I decided that I want to do quite a nuanced, balanced, detailed video about the protest that's coming up, what it means for the club, how effective can it be, and like I said, to take a real look at the history of protesting football and where it's been successful, but also where it's not worked. But guys, before we get into it, if you enjoy my content and would like to see more, please do me the distinct honour of liking and sharing the video, subscribe to the channel, or just roast me in the comments, whatever gets you through your day. Oh, and I've been getting a lot of that recently, mate. So, a couple of disclaimers here. Just before I get into the video, I think it's really important to lay these things out on the table. I support the protests. I'm not a fan of BlueCo. I'm not loving what's going on right now. But personally, for me as a football content creator, what I'm not going to do is just talk about that in every single video, because what ultimately I'm here to talk about is the football. Football is a beautiful and an ugly game on any given day, right? You can get a dirty 1-0 win and be absolutely buzzing about it, or you can play incredibly well with luscious luxury passing football and get nothing out of it because the other team was just better than you. Ups and downs is part of football. That's just how it is, right? That's just how it is. And just because I don't spend all of my time talking about BlueCo out, that doesn't mean that I'm happy with the way that things are going at the moment. So what are Chelsea fans protesting about, right? Now, if you're a Chelsea YouTube watcher in general, then you will know about this already. We are, it's largely results-based at the end of the day. Since BlueCo have taken over, they've spent a lot of money. They've bought a lot of players that haven't really come good. They seem to have changed the model to favour financial success over sporting success, which is a massive problem for most people. We have a lack of identity on the pitch. We are cycling through managers. It's a mental rate. It's literally crazy. We've had, 7 managers or something in the last 4 years since BlueCo have taken over. And ultimately, this has all been compounded with really poor communication from the club, which most recently, I think it was one of the board members, Daniel Finkelstein, who recently had a meeting with Chelsea fans, and he just didn't say any of the right things. So the rare opportunity we got to actually talk to someone from the board, they absolutely didn't deliver. So Chelsea fans, rightly, based on our recent abject performances in general, are not happy with the way that things are going at the club, and the noise is getting louder. That is absolutely true. And that is culminating in the protest on the 18th, being led by not a Project CFC, but also with support from Strasbourg fans coming over from France, because they are obviously owned by BlueCo as well. And there are members from 3 different fan groups in Strasbourg who are also joining in this protest. So despite the last protest not going particularly well, it does seem like this one is going to have a stronger and clearer message. There's a pre-match march towards Stamford Bridge planned, which is going to contain coordinated chants and messaging focused on one thing: BlueCo out. So the fact already that the messaging is going to be clearer this time, I think, is really important, and any successful protest is going to be based on clear messaging. The issue with last time was, chants about Spurs and ex-players and ex-managers and stuff, and obviously it got a little bit out of hand, but what is really, really promising already is that there is a much clearer, more defined message going in this time, and hopefully that will support the cause. So, can the protest work? Yes and no is the honest answer to that question. And the reason is, any protest that has worked is either been under exceptional circumstances, absolutely exceptional circumstances for like a short spell of protests, or they've been sustained with other things involved, like financial pressure and legal litigation. So let's just talk about a couple of the examples, right? We're going to start off with the Super League, right? In 2021, obviously the Super League was floated, and it was this idea that the top 6 in the Premier League were going to get to join this Super League, with the likes of Juventus and Real Madrid and clubs from all over the world who wanted a bigger slice of the TV revenue pie. Now, the issue with that is there was looking to be no relegation, there was looking to be no jeopardy, and it really affected the football triangle in general. So there were coordinated protests absolutely everywhere about this, one of the biggest being the Man United fans storming the pitch. Now, what we do know is the Super League didn't end up happening, and ultimately the outside pressure did affect positive change in that regard. None of us want to see a Super League. We all like football the basic way that it is, with relegation, with fairness, with the opportunity for teams like Leicester to get themselves promoted up and win the league and create these magical stories, right? Even though football has a habit of falling back into old habits, ultimately the opportunity for anyone to come and do the absolutely unthinkable is always there, and that is literally one of the things that makes the sport so special. But the reason that this protest worked in particular is it was coming from all sides, right? The fans were doing coordinated protests with each other. That was absolutely huge. The pitch invasion at Man United was absolutely huge. There was pressure from pundits and media as well. The likes of Gary Neville obviously speaking out about it, which was absolutely huge. The British government got involved, do you know what I mean, and threatened litigation, which is absolutely huge. So within 48 hours of this coming from everywhere, literally all sides, fans, government, media, and ex-footballers, pundits, all of those kinds of guys, it folded in 48 hours. There was talk about it going on, but obviously since then the Champions League has restructured to allow more games, better slices of the pie for the bigger teams. The really important thing here is the reason that this is the exceptional circumstance, right? Because we were talking about something that infected the entirety of football. It was so massive. It was so huge. We weren't talking about one club's fortunes. We were talking about every single team in the football pyramid essentially being affected negatively, apart from those who made it into the Super League. So it made sense that it was such a big deal. So the next one I want to move on to is the Liverpool protest in 2016 when FSG tried to raise the ticket prices up to £77. So it was an absolutely massive statement. 10,000 Liverpool fans walked out of that game against Sunderland, I think it was, in the 77th minute, and they left the stadium not completely empty because it was 10,000 fans, but it was enough. It made a huge impact, and it worked at the end of the day. So the reason that this protest worked is because it was delineated down to one really specific issue in ticket pricing, right? They weren't at that point protesting the ownership themselves, they were just protesting the price hike in the tickets up £77, and they made a really committed statement by walking out in the 77th minute, and it worked. So one of the reasons that this worked is because getting up, walking out and boycotting affected directly, potentially their potential revenue. Do you know what I mean? If they got the idea that 10,000 fans were going to stop buying these tickets, that puts a dent in that initial ticket revenue, right? And what Liverpool did in response is they froze ticket prices for 2 years, and things have increased since then. It's normal. Inflation is a thing. Do you know what I mean? Prices go up, obviously, but they still haven't reached that £77 level, I think. The optics were terrible. It directly affected their revenue, and Liverpool ended up drawing 2-2 in that game in particular. Like I think it was Sunderland. You'll have to correct me in the comments if I was wrong. But the reason that protest worked is because it was at such a specific detail, right? Do you know what I mean? It was matched. It wasn't FSG out. It wasn't it wasn't quite a big vague statement. It was something they were able to affect directly with potentially hitting the match day product. And it worked. Wicked. Great for Liverpool. Big fan of that, and ultimately has led to slightly improved fan communication and not massive ticket rises in the future. So it seems that one worked too. The next and the biggest and smallest one is about Blackpool. So the Blackpool owners were terrible for a really long time, and they were being protested by fans for years and years and years. It was not a couple of protests over a season or two. They were pushing back at their ownership at every single opportunity they got, but there was other things going on as well. So with the Blackpool did eventually end up selling the club, and the reason for that is not just because of the protests, although they were a part of it, it's because litigation got involved, right? There was a legal precedent because they had been basically sued for financial mismanagement of the club. Now, I can already hear what you're all saying. Chelsea are being financially mismanaged at the moment, so is that a route we can go down? At the moment, no, because if we continue the way that we are, in a few years, it's going to start hitting the coffers, and maybe there's something you can get into there. But as of right now, even though we're seeing losses here, losses there, record losses, we're seeing record losses everywhere. This is a private equity business that plans to lose money to make money. So as far as the year-on-year books go at the moment, Chelsea are safe. Do you know what I mean? It is, yes, the future looks drab, don't get me wrong, but the financial mismanagement isn't a problem right now. And obviously, Blackpool's situation was much more dire than ours is. We are 6th in the Premier League, right? And at the end of the day, we can be unhappy as fans, as I am, by the way. I feel like I need to constantly keep backing that up. I'm not happy with how things are at the moment. I want to see things improve. I want to see us get better, but we are nowhere near in the same sort of situation that Blackpool were, and it took years of protests and eventual financial litigation to get the owners to sell. So with that all said and done, now let's take a little look at times that protests haven't worked. Manchester United have been protesting the Glazers for 20 years, often in marches of thousands. The closest they've come to getting what they want was Jim Ratcliffe coming in and buying 25% of the club, right? Now, this wasn't necessarily because of the protests. There was a financial possibility for the Glazers which aligned with their interests in order to get someone to invest into the club, which made them more money, which basically made them sell. But they still retain 75% of their ownership. So even though Jim Ratcliffe is in charge of the running of the club right now, the Glazers are still there. And unfortunately, they're probably not going anywhere unless someone comes in with their valuation of the club, which is another important thing that we're going to get onto in a little bit. Arsenal fans also have been protesting their club for years. Do you know what I mean? Since the Arsene Wenger days and since the days of prime AFTV, Kroenke out has, for me, that's, one of the biggest examples I can think of hearing something similar to what Chelsea are going through at the moment with the fan base. The Arsenal supporters have not been a fan of the Kroenkes for a really, really long time, and they have been protesting them for even longer. But again, nothing's happened. Now, with Arsenal, obviously it's very different at the moment, because what we're looking at with Arsenal is supposed mismanagement of the team for a long time, where they weren't competing, they were spending money on the wrong players, and they weren't doing things in the right way. But they brought in Mikel Arteta, backed him, and now they are experiencing success. So there's a lot less noise, if any noise, that I'm seeing at all at the moment about Kroenke's out, because they're happy with their current financial structure, their sporting structure, their model, and obviously they are challenging for leagues year on year at the moment, so they're happy. Another really interesting one is the Newcastle situation, right? Newcastle were protesting Mike Ashley for a really, really, really long time. Mike Ashley was looking for a way to sell the club, but it wasn't because he was being protested by the fans, right? It didn't work for him financially anymore. And at the end of the day, the only reason he sold wasn't because of pressure from the club. It was because a buyer came in. And they tried to make that happen for a little while. Do you know what I mean? And obviously, it was really unfortunate for Newcastle, because they were kind of the trigger that created the fit and proper owners test, which is something that we've now seen as Chelsea fans as well. Again, Mike Ashley out was a big message for a really, really long time. It wasn't pressure from the fans that made it happen. It was the buyer coming in. So in terms of protesting ownerships, right? Not even just ownerships, just in terms of protesting things in football in general, what actually works? Financial pressure, public embarrassment, external pressure, whether it be legal, political, or from sponsors that are concerned about what's going on with the club, and most importantly, sustained action over time. Like I say, the biggest example of a protest working to get their club out is the Blackpool one, right? And that took a really, really, really long time. And that, combined with the legal ramifications, is eventually what got it over the line. So in order to get BlueCo to sell the club, they're going to need to see massive, massive, massive dips and issues. So we've talked about, before, I've seen a lot of talk about, and I've been involved in some conversations about financial boycotts, right? They are going to need to see an absolutely huge amount of money go out of their pockets in order to consider selling the club, because it will then become financially impossible for them. And I know it hurts and I know it sucks, but the truth of the fact is, even with all of the record losses and all of the money that we're seeing not working at the moment, as of right now, they still think it can work. So what we're all doing is we're predicting look at this, what's happening right now. It's obviously not going to work. They're obviously not seeing it like that. They're seeing it as bumps in the road, right? And I'm going to have a conversation about the finances with someone who actually knows what they're talking about really, really soon on another episode of It's Time to Talk About. But the biggest thing in private equity, right, which is, I've been questioned, do I know anything about private equity? It's I am by no means an expert at all, and I do not profess to be. But what I do know about private equity is debt is cheaper than assets, right? Because debt is tax-free. So working in a debt model, like every single Premier League club has debt. Yes, we've got the most debt because we are buying the most stuff. We're buying the most players. So we're creating the most debt. But at the end of the day, debt is more financially sustainable than assets because you're not taxed on them. Now, like I say, in another video, I'm going to get into that in a really big way. But that is a really difficult pill for us to swallow, because we are just seeing things coming out being like, Chelsea are losing money here, Chelsea are losing money here, Chelsea are losing money here. But the truth of the fact is that kind of is their plan. Now, is it going as well as they want it to? Absolutely not. I don't think that they can look at the sporting side of things and say, oh yeah, this is definitely how we expected things to go. But from a financial side, they're probably still looking at things right now and being like, no, this is still working the way we want it to, and we still believe that things are going to go good in the future. So look, the other difficult thing about being a Chelsea fan is we were blessed with a bit of a unicorn in an owner in a lot of ways under Roman Abramovich, right? Roman Abramovich was a very, very, very wealthy man. Where he got his wealth from, do you know what I mean? Is we can have conversations about that outside of YouTube, but that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what as Chelsea fans we know is Roman Abramovich was a very, very wealthy man. He was a football fan, and Chelsea was a passion project to him. Those kind of owners don't really exist in football anymore, and largely the reason for that is because of how expensive football clubs have become. No one is just going to be like, I've got $4 billion in the bank, I'm going to spend half of that on Chelsea and just throw a load of money at them. Do you know what I mean? It's like individuals are not really in a position to buy football clubs anymore. Football clubs are owned by corporations across the board. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. Football is turned into a business, and that is the most difficult pill to swallow for us as fans, because for us, it's about the game and the joy of the game, right? But at the end of the day, these BlueCos and FSGs and Kroenkes and Glazers and all of these guys are private equity firms and corporations that only have the bottom line in mind. That's all they care about. This is why Arsenal, for so long, were happy with fourth place, right? Now, as football fans, we can talk about, fourth place trophy doesn't matter. And it's like, as a football fan, I absolutely agree with you. But the reason that Arsenal didn't have a problem with how the club was being run, as long as they were finishing fourth, because it met their financial model and it meant that the club was sustainable and they were getting out of it what they wanted to get out of it. So look, let's wrap this up in terms of, can the protests work? The answer is yes, the right protest absolutely can work, but I think it needs to be more focused at an individual thing. And the truth of the fact is, and I've mentioned this before, I don't think that this protest will lead to them going out. I think it can be the beginning of something that leads to them making meaningful change. I think the only thing that will get BlueCo out is a buyer. That's the truth. Do you know what I mean? And there's obviously been a lot of very interesting social media content, especially on YouTube recently, with the spider graph talking about the fact, the holding companies and the fact that BlueCo can sell. So yes, BlueCo can sell, but they'd need to attract a buyer, and they are not going to sell for less or the same as what they bought it for. They are only going to sell at a profit, because that is why the shareholders will have got involved in the first place. When the shareholders all got involved in BlueCo, the Clear Lake guys, the Todd Bowley guys, on the table would have been, this is what we want to spend, and this is what long-term we want to get you back out of it. And the return on the investment, we want to increase the profitability of the club. So the truth of the fact is, even if someone came in right now with what the club is worth on the books and to cover the amount of debt that we've got and the amount of money that was invested, if it was even, that's not going to be enough. Do you know what I mean? It's like, these investors will only sell when it is worth more, or when it is absolutely hemorrhaging money. And although it looks like we're hemorrhaging money at the moment, it's a long-term thing. Do you know what I mean? So unfortunately, it's just not going to work that way. So what I want to see from the protests is a focused message trying to get the clubs to change, right? Trying to get the model to change. Because honestly, and come at me in the comments about this, man. I already know you're going to. This sounds like I'm not for the protest. Like, I am. I genuinely am. But based on history and what we've seen about how protests work in football and when they don't work, big vague messages don't work. And like I said, the only time we've seen a club successfully, or a club's fandom successfully out their ownership, was Blackpool. They were in a lot worse situation than we are. They legally, financially mismanaged the club, so they were able to get courts involved and force them out that way and get money to go back into the club. So look, am I for the protests? Yes, absolutely, 100% yes. I can't say that any louder than I already have. Do I love BlueCo? No. Do I like selling Ian Matson to Aston Villa so we can buy Omari Kellyman for 20 mil? Do I think that's going to affect the team in the long run? No, absolutely not. Do I hate watching us get drubbed 8-2 by PSG, losing 3-0 to Everton, losing 3-0 to Man City, losing to Leeds and making them look like Real Madrid? Like, no, it's awful. As a football fan, it's absolutely awful, and I do want to see change. But what I'm trying to highlight here is what I think I see to be the realism of protest in football, and it seems to work when the target idea is a lot more specific. BlueCo are billionaires. I mean, they're literally just billionaires. So, like I say, for me, if someone reasonable comes in, because, we have a fit and proper owners test for a reason. We don't want the Ricketts in with the, and there were protests against the Ricketts as well. If you remember, when the Ricketts were one of the people coming in to buy the club, there were protests against that. So we obviously didn't want them. There are fit and proper owners tests for a reason. So we need someone to come in. It's going to be, if anyone comes in to buy the club, it's going to be a corporation. It's going to be a conglomerate. It's going to be a private equity firm with billionaire backers. Do you know what I mean? That is what it's going to be. We're not going to get a Roman Abramovich style unicorn. And even if we did, that way it doesn't work anymore, because Roman Abramovich is probably one of the sole reasons that a lot of the financial regulation that currently exists in football exists in the first place. We were really lucky to get away with the 75 charges, and obviously Man City is still struggling with that because they're fighting it. We have gotten away with that scot-free, and a 10 million fine is absolutely nothing compared to what it could have been when you look at the likes of Everton, Nottingham Forest getting deducted points. You look at Leicester, who are really, really struggling at the moment and have been put into an even further difficult situation, with now them potentially getting relegated to League One because of financial mismanagement. So even if a Roman Abramovich did come back in and he had money to just throw at the club, you can't do it anymore. It doesn't work. The only people that can afford to buy and run these clubs are private equity firms. So like I say, my salient point, I support the protests and I want to see change, but I think the best thing for protests is to protest the things you specifically want to see change. And like I say, man, I'm genuinely expecting a lot of hate for this video. All I really want to do is talk about football. Like, I've been accused of being paid by the club. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've got less than 2,000 subs, man. I'm not getting paid by the club to sit here and make these videos. I find the financial stuff interesting and all that, but ultimately what I am is a football fan, and I will always support my club through thick and thin. If we got relegated, I'd be livid. I'd be screwing. doing, I'd be so angry. And you can bet that I would be here on camera screaming about it to YouTube if we found ourselves in the Championship. But would I stop supporting my club? No, I'll still be back here. I'll still be talking about football. I'm still going to talk about transfer news. I'm still going to do match reviews. I'm going to do match previews. I'm going to do comparisons because I love football ultimately. And regardless of what's going on with the hierarchy of the club, that will always be the case for me. So guys, I'm a little bit scared about this one, to be completely honest, because I've tried my absolute best to be honest and about what I think is going to happen, but also be honest about what I want to happen. I want to see change. I want to see this mess end. I want to see the model, even in the short term, change from looking at the, I think the best thing that can affect the club at the moment is sporting success. I think if we get sporting success, we can get good sponsors, we can get the money from the competitions that we're competing in and that we're doing well in. And ultimately, I think in the short term, that to me feels like the best way in order to kind of sort out the situation. I don't know enough about private equity firms and, the way that BlueCo are doing their business to see whether it's working or not. Do you know what I mean? It looks like to the majority of us that it's not. But like I say, go easy on me, man. Go easy on me. I'm just trying to be here putting out some information. And like I say, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? Protests can work in specific situations, but there needs to be more to it than just fan outrage. And I'll level about one more thing here as well. One of the reasons I don't talk about the protests very much is because I'm not able to go. And it feels disingenuous for me to push people to go and protest, to change the club, when I'm not able to attend and be part of that movement myself. So if you want to go to the protest, I absolutely support that. If you're not going to the protest, I think that's okay too. I'm a Chelsea fan like you, and I want to see change. Nice one, guys. Thank you very much for sticking around to the end of the video. If you did, I'll catch up with you very, very soon. Take it easy. Peace.